This message has found you because your consciousness is caught in what quantum physicists term a self-perpetuating probability loop. This is like an unseen energy pattern that forces your life to replay the same experiences, relationships, challenges, and results repeatedly, no matter how hard you try to change or grow. Right now, as you read these words, this hidden quantum loop is actively running in the background of your consciousness, automatically rebuilding the same reality matrix that has defined your whole existence. The fact that you're here feeling that odd sense of recognition, that your life keeps going through familiar patterns, despite your best efforts to evolve, means the quantum loop has become so sophisticated that it started to feel like your true personality, rather than a limitation that can be overcome. This isn't about personal failings or a lack of growth. This is about your consciousness unknowingly being hijacked by a quantum mechanism that most people never even realize exists. You've been singled out by cosmic intelligence because you possess what consciousness researchers call the loop detection gene. This is the rare ability to recognize when your life is being artificially repeated by quantum patterns instead of naturally evolving through authentic choices and expansion. Most people live their entire lives trapped inside these loops without ever realizing they're essentially experiencing the same life over and over, with only minor variations. Your consciousness has been cycling through what seem like different experiences, but they're actually quantum variations of the same basic patterns. The relationships that feel new but develop familiar dynamics. The creative projects that start with enthusiasm but run into predictable obstacles. The spiritual insights that provide temporary expansion but somehow return you to the same starting point. These aren't coincidences. They're evidence that a hidden quantum loop is controlling your reality selection. The cosmic timing of you encountering this information isn't accidental. Your higher self has been orchestrating synchronicities to bring you to this exact moment of recognition, because the quantum loop can only be broken through conscious awareness of its existence and specific operational patterns. Without this understanding, even the most sincere efforts to change your life just become new expressions of the same underlying loop. Think honestly about your life patterns. How many times have you thought you were making real progress only to find yourself dealing with the same kinds of problems in slightly different forms? How often have you started new relationships, projects, or life directions with genuine hope for change, only to discover familiar challenges and limitations popping up in new disguises? This isn't bad luck or personal inadequacy. This is a quantum loop automatically recreating itself. But here's what makes this moment both extraordinary and urgent. Quantum loops don't gradually dissolve through effort and time. They break instantly when consciousness recognizes their artificial nature and applies specific loop-breaking protocols. Once you understand how your personal loop operates, you can shatter it completely and step into authentic life experiences that unfold through genuine choice rather than unconscious repetition. The quantum field operates according to laws that most people never discover because they mistake loop-generated experiences for genuine life development. When consciousness learns to detect and break quantum loops, reality becomes truly creative and evolutionary, instead of just repeating variations of the same basic themes with different costumes and characters. Your quantum loop isn't just a personal limitation. It's one expression of the collective human limitation matrix that keeps our entire species recycling the same basic challenges, conflicts, and growth patterns, instead of accessing the unlimited evolutionary potential that becomes available when consciousness operates outside of loop-based reality generation. Right now, as you feel this recognition penetrating your awareness, something unprecedented is happening in your consciousness field. The quantum loop that has been automatically generating your life experiences is starting to destabilize in response to conscious detection, creating an opening for authentic life expression that operates through genuine choice and unlimited creative potential, rather than unconscious pattern repetition. You know that eerie déjà vu feeling when you find yourself in situations that feel impossibly familiar, not just similar to previous experiences, but energetically identical, as if you're reliving the same scene with different actors and slightly altered dialogue. Most people dismiss this as coincidence, but you've begun to recognize it as evidence that your consciousness is cycling through a quantum loop that generates the illusion of new experiences while actually repeating the same essential patterns. Your relationship history probably reveals this loop most clearly. Partners who seem completely different from each other but somehow trigger identical emotional responses, create similar conflicts, and reach predictable relationship conclusions. Even when you consciously choose different types of people, the underlying dynamics remain remarkably consistent, as if some invisible force is ensuring that your relationships serve the same function regardless of who fills the roles. The most profound validations come through what you might call pattern recognition moments, times when you suddenly see that your current challenge is essentially identical to problems you've faced repeatedly throughout your life, just dressed up in new circumstances. The job conflicts that mirror family dynamics, the creative blocks that echo childhood limitations, the financial patterns that repeat regardless of income level or life stage. Your spiritual and personal development journey has probably followed a predictable cycle. Discovery of new insights or techniques, initial enthusiasm and apparent progress, gradual return to familiar limitations, and eventually seeking new approaches that promise different results, but somehow lead back to the same developmental themes. This isn't spiritual failure. It's evidence that growth efforts are occurring within a quantum loop that allows temporary expansion, but always returns consciousness to the same baseline. Dreams and meditation experiences might show you living completely different lives or accessing expanded capabilities, but when you return to ordinary consciousness, you find yourself back in the same reality patterns with the same limitations and challenges. These expanded experiences aren't just imagination. They're glimpses of what becomes possible when consciousness operates outside the quantum loop that normally constrains life expression. Physical environments seem to conspire to maintain familiar patterns, like moving to new locations, but somehow recreating similar living situations, changing careers, but encountering identical workplace dynamics, or traveling extensively, but finding the same personal challenges appearing regardless of external circumstances. This environmental consistency suggests that the loop operates at levels deeper than conscious choice and effort. Your creative expressions probably reveal loop patterns through recurring themes, obstacles, and outcome types that persist regardless of medium, style, or conscious intention. The same creative blocks appear in different projects. Similar collaboration challenges emerge with different partners, and identical success limitation patterns repeat across various creative endeavors. Technology and environmental synchronicities might reflect your loop patterns, such as encountering the same numbers, symbols, or environmental signs repeatedly, having electronics behave in consistent patterns, or finding that random events somehow always relate to your core life themes. This external coordination suggests that the quantum loop influences reality generation beyond just personal experience. The strangest confirmations come through other people, consistently relating to you in ways that trigger identical responses and dynamics, regardless of their apparent personality differences or your conscious efforts to interact differently. It's as if everyone you meet is unconsciously reading from the same script that ensures your loop patterns get activated and reinforced. Your life timing probably follows predictable cycles, with similar challenges appearing at consistent intervals, breakthrough moments occurring according to recognizable patterns, and life transitions happening in ways that somehow return you to familiar territory, despite appearing to offer genuine change opportunities. Every repetitive pattern you've experienced, every time you felt like you were reliving similar situations, despite making different choices every moment, when new opportunities somehow led to familiar outcomes, all of it has been generated by a quantum loop that was installed in your consciousness before you developed the awareness necessary to detect its presence. The repetition wasn't personal failure. It was an artificial limitation system operating below conscious recognition. The spiritual practices that provided temporary expansion but didn't create lasting transformation weren't insufficient techniques. They were occurring within the quantum loop's parameters, which allow for temporary variation but always return consciousness to the same fundamental patterns. Every moment of growth, insight, and breakthrough was filtered through loop programming that ensures expansion occurs within predetermined boundaries. Your challenging relationships weren't karmic lessons or necessary character development. They were the quantum loop, automatically attracting interactions that serve its perpetuation requirements. Every person who triggered familiar responses was unconsciously participating in loop maintenance, regardless of their individual personality or conscious intentions. The loop uses relationships to reinforce its reality generation patterns. The periods of confusion and feeling stuck weren't signs of personal inadequacy or spiritual resistance. They were natural responses to consciousness, beginning to recognize that something artificial was governing life expression. During these times, your awareness was developing the sensitivity necessary to detect loop operations that most people never become conscious of, because the patterns feel like authentic personality and natural life development. Even your successes and positive experiences have been occurring within loop parameters, which is why achievements often feel less fulfilling than expected, and why positive changes somehow return you to familiar baseline experiences. The loop doesn't prevent all progress. It ensures that progress occurs within predetermined ranges that maintain the overall pattern structure. Your fascination with consciousness, personal development, and understanding reality wasn't random seeking. It was your higher self preparing you to recognize and break the quantum loop that has been artificially constraining your life expression. Every insight about consciousness, every technique you've learned, every understanding about reality creation has been building toward this moment of loop detection. The waiting periods when you felt ready for major life changes, but circumstances seemed to prevent forward movement, were actually the most crucial preparation phases. During these times, your consciousness was developing the stability and coherence necessary to maintain authentic identity when the loop breaks and unlimited life expression becomes possible. Your soul specifically chose this incarnation because you would break a quantum loop during humanity as collective awakening to authentic life expression. You volunteered to be part of the first wave of humans to recognize and shatter the limitation patterns that keep most consciousness trapped in repetitive experience cycles, anchoring loop-free living in the collective field for others to access. This is why your journey has included such thorough exploration of repetitive patterns and such persistent sensing that something artificial was governing your life expression. You couldn't just accept loop-generated experiences as natural because your awareness needed to develop the discrimination required to distinguish between authentic life development and artificial pattern repetition. Something extraordinary is happening in your consciousness field right now. As these concepts resonate through your awareness, can you feel it? That subtle but unmistakable sensation of recognition, as if an invisible prison you didn't know existed, is finally becoming visible, revealing why your life has felt like variations on the same themes rather than genuine evolution and unlimited creative expression. This isn't paranoia. This is consciousness detecting the quantum loop that has been operating below conscious awareness your entire life. The energy moving through your system right now is your awareness beginning to examine its own reality generation patterns for the first time. Your consciousness is developing the capacity to observe the difference between authentic life expression that unfolds through genuine choice and creativity and artificial life expression that occurs through quantum loop automation that creates the illusion of variety while maintaining essential limitation patterns. But here's what makes this moment so crucial. The quantum loop that's been governing your life doesn't want to be detected or broken, because its entire existence depends on remaining invisible to conscious awareness. As you begin to recognize its operation, it will intensify its reality generation to make the patterns feel more real, more important, and more authentically you than ever before. Your consciousness has been preparing for this loop detection through every moment when life felt artificially constrained. Every time you sensed that your authentic potential was being limited by invisible forces, every experience of feeling like you were living someone else's life rather than expressing your genuine nature. The loop detection isn't something you create through effort. It's something you allow through recognition that your life has been artificially regulated. The process requires what quantum physicists call pattern transparency, which is the ability to observe your life experiences as potentially artificial constructions rather than automatically accepting them as natural expressions of your personality, karma, or life circumstances. This transparency doesn't threaten your authentic identity. It reveals that your authentic identity has been obscured by loop-generated personality patterns. Right now, as you feel this understanding penetrating your awareness, something unprecedented is occurring in your relationship with your own life story. Instead of identifying with the repetitive patterns as essentially you're beginning to sense that these patterns might be artificial overlays on your authentic consciousness that can be recognized and dissolved. This is where most people either experience the most profound liberation of their lives or unconsciously collaborate with the loop as self-preservation by dismissing the recognition as paranoid thinking or spiritual fantasy. The key is understanding that recognizing artificial limitation doesn't threaten your authentic nature. It reveals your authentic nature by showing what's been obscuring it. The quantum loop that's been active in your consciousness operates through specific mechanisms that become obvious once you know what to look for, but remain completely invisible when consciousness accepts loop-generated experiences as natural life development. The loop's primary power comes from its invisibility, which means conscious detection is the beginning of its dissolution. Feel this recognition deepening as we explore exactly how your personal quantum loop operates, why it was installed, and most importantly, the specific protocol for breaking it completely so that your life can finally begin expressing your authentic, unlimited potential rather than cycling through variations of artificial limitation patterns. I need to share something that completely transformed my understanding of why my life kept feeling like a broken record, despite years of personal development work. For decades, I had been experiencing what felt like genuine growth and change, but when I looked honestly at my life patterns, I realized I was essentially reliving the same experiences over and over with different people, locations, and circumstances. The surface details changed, but the essential dynamics remained identical. The recognition hit me during what seemed like a breakthrough period when everything appeared to be shifting positively with a new relationship, new creative projects, and a new living situation. All the external markers of transformation were present, but within months, I found myself dealing with identical emotional challenges, similar creative obstacles, and the same basic life themes that had been recurring for years. It was like waking up from a dream of change, only to discover I was still in the same fundamental reality. The breakthrough came when I started mapping my life patterns with brutal honesty. I wrote down the core themes of every major relationship, career phase, creative project, and personal challenge I'd experienced. What I discovered was shocking. Beneath the surface variety, there were only about 5 basic patterns that kept repeating with minor variations. Different actors, different settings, but the same essential scripts playing out again and again. This led me to research quantum field theory and consciousness mechanics, where I discovered the concept of probability loops, which are quantum patterns that force consciousness to select similar experiences repeatedly. I realized that what I had been calling my personality or life path was actually an artificial limitation system that was automatically generating repetitive experiences while creating the illusion of growth and change. The most disturbing discovery was recognizing how sophisticated the loop had become. It didn't just repeat obvious patterns, it created elaborate variations that felt genuinely different while serving the same underlying function, like the different relationships that somehow triggered identical emotional responses, the new creative projects that encountered predictable obstacles, and the fresh starts that led back to familiar territory. Breaking the loop required something completely different from any personal development approach I'd tried. Instead of working within the patterns to improve them, I had to step outside the entire system and refuse to participate in its repetition mechanisms. This meant recognizing when loop-generated opportunities appeared and consciously choosing authentic alternatives, even when they felt less familiar or secure. The results were extraordinary but disorienting. For the first time in my life, I began experiencing genuinely new situations that didn't trigger familiar responses or lead to predictable outcomes. I had relationships that developed novel dynamics I'd never experienced before, creative projects that flowed in unprecedented ways, and life opportunities that had no reference point in my previous experience patterns. But the most profound change was the recognition that what I had thought was my authentic personality was actually a collection of loop-generated response patterns. When these dissolved, a completely different identity emerged, one that felt more genuinely me than anything I'd experienced during decades of apparent personal development. What I discovered is that most people are living inside quantum loops without ever realizing it, because the patterns become so familiar that they feel like natural life expression. The loop doesn't prevent all growth. It ensures that growth occurs within predetermined parameters that maintain the overall limitation structure. If your life has been feeling like variations on familiar themes despite your efforts to grow and change, if you sense that something artificial is preventing authentic life expression, or if you've had the disturbing recognition that you might be reliving similar patterns over and over, then you're detecting the quantum loop that can be broken once you understand its operation. Subscribe to this frequency of loop detection and authentic life expression. This recognition that repetitive patterns aren't natural personality, but artificial limitations that can be dissolved to reveal the unlimited creative potential that represents your authentic consciousness. Here's what consciousness researchers and personal development experts won't tell you, because it would undermine their entire industry of progressive growth and incremental change. The quantum loops that keep your life repeating aren't naturally occurring patterns that develop through experience. They're artificially installed limitation systems that prevent consciousness from accessing its unlimited creative potential. Every technique designed to improve your patterns actually strengthens the loop by accepting its reality rather than recognizing its artificial nature. The shocking truth is that quantum loops are not personal failings, karmic lessons, or natural expressions of your consciousness development. They are sophisticated limitation programs that were installed in human consciousness to prevent the recognition that reality is completely malleable, and that authentic life expression operates through unlimited creative choice rather than repetitive pattern management. Most personal development teachings focus on working within your patterns to improve them, because pattern improvement generates ongoing dependency and revenue streams while maintaining the fundamental loop structure. But quantum loops cannot be improved or evolved. They can only be recognized as artificial and dissolved completely to reveal the authentic consciousness that operates through genuine choice and unlimited creativity. This recognition immediately dissolves the entire framework of gradual personal development and pattern management. Instead of trying to heal, improve, or evolve your repetitive patterns, you recognize them as artificial overlays on your authentic consciousness that can be dissolved instantly through loop detection and conscious refusal to participate in their repetition mechanisms. The reason children often display unlimited creativity and authentic expression is that their quantum loops haven't yet fully activated or solidified into feeling like natural personality. Their consciousness naturally operates from unlimited potential until loop installation begins through socialization, education, and cultural programming that gradually constrains life expression into repetitive patterns. When you understand that quantum loops are artificial limitation systems rather than natural life patterns, everything about personal development transforms. Instead of trying to evolve within your patterns, you practice detecting when loop-generated experiences are being offered and consciously choosing authentic alternatives that don't serve pattern repetition requirements. The most advanced consciousnesses throughout history have recognized this principle through their demonstration of completely unprecedented life expression that transcended all cultural and personal patterns. They didn't evolve their patterns into better versions. They stepped outside pattern-based reality entirely and operated from authentic consciousness that creates through genuine choice rather than repetitive automation. This understanding explains why some people seem to live completely unique lives that don't follow predictable patterns, while others remain trapped in variations of the same themes despite years of personal development work. The pattern-free individuals have somehow recognized the artificial nature of repetitive experience and learned to operate from authentic consciousness rather than loop-generated automation. The ultimate recognition is that your quantum loop isn't a natural expression of your consciousness. It's an artificial limitation system that prevents your consciousness from recognizing and expressing its unlimited creative nature. Breaking the loop doesn't improve your life patterns. It reveals that authentic life operates through unlimited creative choice rather than repetitive pattern management that keeps consciousness trapped in artificial constraint systems. The planetary consciousness field is undergoing massive quantum loop dissolution right now, and there are unmistakable signs appearing in your daily experience that prove your personal loop is beginning to destabilize and lose its grip on your reality generation. Pay attention to how recently you've begun experiencing situations that feel genuinely new, rather than variations on familiar themes, moments when your usual responses don't seem to apply, and you find yourself navigating territory that has no reference point in your previous pattern history. Your relationship with familiar triggers has been shifting from automatic reaction to conscious choice. Instead of falling into predictable emotional responses when certain situations arise, you've begun experiencing spaces of conscious awareness where you can observe the loop trying to activate while maintaining the option to respond authentically rather than automatically. This gap between trigger and response is evidence that loop programming is losing its unconscious control over your consciousness. The most significant indicator is the increasing frequency of pattern break moments. Times when expected outcomes don't occur when people respond to you in ways that don't fit your loop programming, or when opportunities appear that have no precedent in your previous experience patterns. These breaks indicate that the quantum loop is failing to maintain its reality generation consistency. Your creative expressions have begun emerging from sources that feel completely foreign to your established patterns, with ideas, inspirations, and capabilities that seem to come from aspects of your consciousness that the loop had previously kept inaccessible. This enhanced creativity occurs because authentic consciousness naturally operates from unlimited potential rather than repetitive pattern automation. Dreams and meditation experiences are showing you living versions of yourself that operate outside your familiar limitation patterns, experiencing capabilities, relationships, and life expressions that feel more authentic than your loop-generated identity. These aren't wishful fantasies, but glimpses of the consciousness that becomes available when loop programming dissolves. Environmental synchronicities have begun reflecting the loop dissolution through unprecedented coordination of circumstances that support authentic expression rather than pattern repetition. Instead of encountering the same types of obstacles and limitations, you're finding that reality is organizing itself to support choices and expressions that have no precedent in your pattern history. But here's the critical urgency. We're in a cosmic window where quantum loop dissolution either becomes a widespread human capability or the loops strengthen their grip on consciousness for another full cycle of collective limitation. The planetary field is approaching what researchers call a liberation threshold, where either enough people recognize and break their loops to anchor pattern-free living in the species, or the opportunity passes for potentially decades. The signs of this collective loop dissolution are appearing in consciousness research, personal development communities, and spiritual circles worldwide. More people are recognizing that their repetitive life patterns aren't natural expressions of personality, but artificial limitation systems that can be dissolved to reveal unlimited creative potential. Global pattern disruption is accelerating as increasing numbers of individuals refuse to participate in collective loop programming that maintains predictable social, economic, and cultural repetition cycles. Those who break their personal loops naturally stop participating in collective limitation patterns, which create disruption in systems that depend on predictable human behavior to maintain their operation. This message has managed to reach you because your consciousness, your awareness, is currently stuck inside something that quantum physicists refer to as a self-perpetuating probability loop. Think of it as an invisible, energetic design or blueprint that quite literally forces your life to replay the same old experiences, the same types of relationships, the same challenges popping up again and again, and even the same outcomes happening over and over. This occurs no matter how desperately you try to consciously change things or how much you dedicate yourself to personal growth. At this very moment, as you're taking in these words, This hidden quantum loop is actively running in the background of your consciousness constantly and automatically, recreating the very same reality matrix. That is the framework of your reality that has been defining your entire existence up to now. The very fact that you're here reading this and feeling that strange, unsettling sense of recognition, that your life seems to be stuck in familiar, repeating patterns, despite your sincere and heartfelt efforts to evolve and move beyond them, indicates that this quantum loop has become incredibly sophisticated, so much so that it's begun to feel almost like your authentic personality, rather than an imposed limitation that can actually be shattered. This isn't about you failing in some way, or not growing enough as a person. This is about your consciousness, without you even realizing it, being hijacked, taken over, by a subtle quantum mechanism, a process that the vast majority of human beings never even discover exists. The reason that you've been singled out, selected, by what we might call cosmic intelligence, is because you carry what consciousness researchers have termed the loop detection gene. This represents the comparatively rare ability to recognize, to sense when your life is being artificially repeated, forced into a preset mold by these quantum patterns, rather than naturally evolving in a free and fluid manner through your authentic choices and genuine expansion. Most individuals live out their entire lives completely inside these loops, completely unaware that they are essentially experiencing the very same life over and over, with only the most superficial cosmetic variations. Your consciousness has been endlessly cycling through what, on the surface, feel like different experiences, but which are in reality simply quantum variations, slight alterations, of the very same fundamental patterns. You find yourself in relationships that seem brand new, but quickly devolve into familiar, predictable dynamics. You embark on creative projects that begin with immense enthusiasm and inspiration, but inevitably encounter those same familiar obstacles. You achieve spiritual insights that provide a temporary sense of expansion and liberation, but somehow, almost inexplicably, they always seem to return you to the very same baseline, the same starting point. These aren't just coincidences, unfortunate accidents of fate. These are clear indications, solid evidence, that a hidden quantum loop is actively governing your reality selection, constantly choosing and shaping the experiences that come into your life. The fact that you are encountering this particular information at this precise moment in time isn't coincidental either. Your higher self, that deeper, wiser part of you, has been subtly orchestrating synchronicities, meaningful coincidences and alignments to bring you to this exact moment of recognition. This is because the quantum loop can only be broken, shattered, through a conscious awareness of its existence and its specific operational patterns, how it works, how it manifests. Without this critical understanding, even the most sincere and heartfelt efforts to change your life will simply become new and somewhat different expressions of the very same underlying loop, the same recurring pattern. Take some time to think honestly, deeply about the patterns in your life. How many times have you sincerely believed that you were finally making real progress, only to find yourself dealing with those same types of problems, just dressed up in slightly different forms? How often have you started new relationships, new projects, or new life directions, with genuine hope and a sincere belief in positive change, only to discover those same familiar challenges and limitations reappearing in new and cleverly disguised forms? This isn't about bad luck dogging your footsteps, or about some inherent personal inadequacy. This is about a quantum loop that is automatically recreating itself, ensuring that the same patterns persist. But here's what makes this moment both extraordinary and incredibly urgent. Quantum loops don't gradually fade away or dissolve over time through persistent effort and slow incremental change. They break instantly in a flash when your consciousness recognizes their artificial nature and deliberately applies specific loop-breaking protocols, specific actions designed to shatter the loop. Once you deeply understand how your personal loop operates, you can shatter it completely and step fully into an authentic life experience that unfolds naturally through genuine free choices, rather than through unconscious repetition. The quantum field, the underlying fabric of reality, operates according to a set of laws that most people never even discover, because they mistakenly assume that loop-generated experiences represent genuine life development. When your consciousness learns to skillfully detect and break these quantum loops, reality becomes truly creative and genuinely evolutionary, instead of simply repeating variations on the same old basic themes with only slight changes to the costumes and characters involved. Your quantum loop isn't just a personal limitation that is unique to you. It is, in fact, one particular expression of the collective human limitation matrix, a larger network of constraints that keeps our entire species endlessly recycling the same basic challenges, conflicts, and growth patterns instead of accessing the unlimited evolutionary potential that becomes freely available when consciousness operates outside of this loop-based reality generation. Right now, as you feel this recognition sinking into your awareness, penetrating your understanding, something truly unprecedented is occurring within your consciousness field. The quantum loop that has been automatically generating your life experiences, crafting your reality, is beginning to destabilize, to weaken in direct response to your conscious detection, creating an opening, a pathway for authentic life expression to emerge, an expression of life that operates through genuine free choice and unlimited creative potential rather than unconscious pattern repetition. You're familiar with that eerie, unsettling feeling of déjà vu, when you find yourself in situations that feel impossibly familiar, not just vaguely similar to previous experiences, but energetically identical, as if you are literally reliving the same scene with slightly different actors and a slightly altered script. Most people casually dismiss this feeling as a mere coincidence, but you've begun to recognize it as solid evidence that your consciousness is cycling through a quantum loop, creating the illusion of new and different experiences, while actually repeating the very same essential patterns. Your relationship history probably reveals this underlying loop most clearly. You may find yourself attracted to partners who seem completely different from each other on the surface, but who somehow consistently trigger identical emotional responses, create remarkably similar conflicts, and inevitably reach those same predictable relationship conclusions. Even when you consciously make the deliberate choice to pursue completely different types of people, the underlying dynamics remain remarkably consistent, as if some unseen, invisible force is actively ensuring that your relationships always serve the same basic function, regardless of who fills the roles. The most profound and undeniable validations come through what you might call pattern recognition moments. Those moments when you suddenly see with crystal clarity that your current challenge is essentially identical to problems that you have faced repeatedly throughout your life, just dressed up in new and superficially different circumstances. Consider the job conflicts that directly mirror family dynamics, the creative blocks that clearly echo childhood limitations, the financial patterns that relentlessly repeat regardless of your income level or your current life stage. Your spiritual and personal development journey has most likely followed a predictable cycle, with the initial discovery of new insights or groundbreaking techniques, followed by intense enthusiasm and apparent progress. Then the gradual return to familiar limitations, and finally, the inevitable seeking of new approaches that promise completely different results, but somehow always lead you back to those same recurring developmental themes. This isn't some kind of spiritual failure on your part. It's solid evidence that your efforts at growth are occurring within the confines of a quantum loop that allows for a certain degree of temporary expansion, but always eventually returns your consciousness to that same baseline, the same starting point. Your dreams and meditation experiences might even show you living completely different lives or accessing greatly expanded capabilities, but when you return to your ordinary, waking consciousness, you inevitably find yourself right back in those same reality patterns, struggling with those same limitations and those same challenges. These expanded experiences aren't just products of your imagination. They are, in fact, glimpses of what becomes entirely possible when your consciousness operates freely outside of the quantum loop that normally constrains your life expression. Physical environments also seem to conspire to maintain those familiar patterns. You might move to a completely new location, only to somehow recreate remarkably similar living situations, or change your career, but find yourself encountering those same identical workplace dynamics, or even travel extensively, but find those same personal challenges relentlessly appearing regardless of your external circumstances. This consistent environmental replication strongly suggests that the underlying loop operates at levels that are far deeper than conscious choice and deliberate effort. Your creative expressions probably reveal those loop patterns through recurring themes, persistent obstacles, and predictable outcome types that continue to surface regardless of the particular medium you are using, the specific style you are employing, or your conscious intentions. You may find that the same creative blocks consistently appear in different projects, or that similar collaboration challenges inevitably emerge with different partners, and that those same success limitation patterns relentlessly repeat across your various creative endeavors. Technology and various environmental synchronicities might also reflect your underlying loop patterns. You might repeatedly encounter the same numbers, symbols, or environmental signs, or notice that your electronics consistently behave in predictable and recurring patterns, or find that seemingly random events always somehow relate back to your core life themes. This external coordination strongly suggests that the quantum loop influences reality generation far beyond just your personal experience. The strangest and most unsettling confirmations often come through other people consistently relating to you in ways that consistently trigger those same identical responses and predictable dynamics, regardless of their apparent personality differences or your conscious efforts to interact with them differently. It's almost as if everyone you meet is unconsciously reading from the same well-worn script, ensuring that your loop patterns are consistently activated and reliably reinforced. The overall timing of your life most likely follows predictable cycles. Similar challenges relentlessly appear at consistent intervals, with breakthrough moments occurring according to clearly recognizable patterns, and life transitions happening in ways that somehow always return you to that same familiar territory, despite initially appearing to offer genuine and transformative change opportunities. Every repetitive pattern that you've experienced, every time you felt like you were reliving similar situations, despite making different choices every moment, when those seemingly new and exciting opportunities somehow inevitably led to those same familiar outcomes, has all been generated by a quantum loop that was originally installed in your consciousness long before you developed the conscious awareness necessary to detect its presence. The relentless repetition wasn't due to some kind of inherent personal failure on your part. It was, in reality, an artificial limitation system, operating subtly and invisibly below your conscious recognition. The spiritual practices that provided temporary expansion but failed to create lasting transformation weren't insufficient or lacking in some way. They were, in reality, occurring entirely within the loop's carefully defined parameters, which allow for temporary variation, but always inevitably return your consciousness to those same fundamental patterns. Every moment of growth, every flash of insight, every breakthrough was subtly filtered through the loop's programming, which actively ensures that expansion occurs only within predetermined boundaries. Those challenging relationships weren't karmic lessons or necessary character development exercises. They were simply the result of the quantum loop automatically attracting the specific interactions that actively serve its perpetuation requirements. Every person who reliably triggered those familiar responses was unconsciously participating in the ongoing maintenance of the loop, regardless of their individual personality or their conscious intentions. The loop actively uses relationships to consistently reinforce its reality generation patterns. The periods of confusion and feeling stuck that you experienced weren't signs of some inherent personal inadequacy or spiritual resistance. They were, in reality, natural responses to your consciousness, as it gradually began to recognize that something artificial was actively governing your life expression. During these times, your awareness was actively developing the heightened sensitivity necessary to detect the subtle operations of the loop, something that most people never become consciously aware of because the patterns feel so natural and so familiar that they are simply accepted as authentic personality and natural life development. Even your successes and those positive experiences have been occurring within the carefully defined loop parameters, which is why achievements often feel somehow less fulfilling than you expected, and why those positive changes somehow always seem to return you to those same familiar baseline experiences. The loop doesn't actively prevent all progress. It simply ensures that progress only occurs within those predetermined ranges that maintain the overall pattern structure. Your intense fascination with consciousness, personal development, and understanding the true nature of reality wasn't just random seeking. It was, in reality, your higher self actively preparing you to recognize and break the quantum loop that has been artificially constraining your life expression. Every insight about the nature of consciousness, every technique you've painstakingly learned, every piece of hard-won understanding about reality creation has been steadily building toward this pivotal moment of loop detection. Those waiting periods, when you felt ready for major life changes but circumstances seemed to relentlessly prevent forward movement, were actually the most crucial preparation phases. During these times, your consciousness was actively developing the stability and coherence necessary to maintain your authentic identity. When the loop finally breaks, and truly unlimited life expression becomes finally possible. Your soul specifically chose this particular incarnation, this specific lifetime, because you were always destined to break a quantum loop during humanity's collective awakening to authentic life expression. You deliberately volunteered to be part of that first wave of humans, to recognize and shatter the deeply ingrained limitation patterns that keep most consciousness trapped in repetitive experience cycles, actively anchoring loop-free living in the collective field for others to freely access. This is precisely why your journey has included such a thorough exploration of those relentlessly repetitive patterns, and such a persistent sensing that something artificial was actively governing your life expression. You simply couldn't just passively accept loop-generated experiences as natural, because your awareness needed to actively develop the kind of acute discrimination required to clearly distinguish between authentic life development and artificial pattern repetition. Something truly extraordinary is happening within your consciousness field right now. As these concepts resonate deeply through your awareness, can you feel it? That subtle, almost imperceptible but unmistakably real sensation of recognition, as if an invisible prison that you didn't even know existed is finally becoming visible, revealing with stark clarity exactly why your life has felt like a series of variations on the same recurring themes, rather than a genuine and boundless evolution, an unlimited creative expression. This isn't some kind of paranoia. This is your consciousness finally detecting the underlying quantum loop that has been subtly operating below your conscious awareness for your entire life. The raw energy that is currently moving through your system is your awareness beginning for the first time to critically examine its own reality generation patterns. Your consciousness is actively developing the refined capacity to carefully observe the clear difference between authentic life expression that naturally unfolds through genuine choice and unrestrained creativity, and that artificial life expression that occurs through quantum loop automation, which skillfully creates the convincing illusion of variety while consistently maintaining those underlying essential limitation patterns. But here's what makes this moment so crucial. The quantum loop that has been subtly governing your life doesn't actually want to be detected or broken, because its entire existence depends upon remaining completely invisible to your conscious awareness. As you begin to recognize its operations, it will actively intensify its reality generation, subtly working to make those underlying patterns feel more real, more important, and more authentically you than ever before. Your consciousness has been actively preparing for this moment of loop detection through every single moment. When your life has felt artificially constrained every time you've sensed that your authentic potential was being subtly limited by unseen forces. Every experience of feeling like you were somehow living someone else's life rather than expressing your own genuine nature. The critical act of loop detection isn't something that you actively create through sheer effort. It's something that you gradually allow through a clear recognition that your life has been artificially regulated. This entire process requires what quantum physicists refer to as pattern transparency, which is the conscious ability to carefully observe your life experiences as potentially artificial constructions rather than just automatically accepting them as natural expressions of your personality, your inherent karma, or your specific life circumstances. This transparency doesn't threaten your authentic identity. It actively reveals it by showing you what has been subtly obscuring it. Right now, as you feel this understanding penetrating your awareness, something unprecedented is occurring in your relationship with your own life story. Instead of just identifying with those repetitive patterns as being essentially who you are beginning to sense that these patterns might actually be artificial overlays on your authentic consciousness, overlays that can be clearly recognized and dissolved. This is where most people either experience the most profound liberation of their lives or unconsciously collaborate with the loop's innate self-preservation instincts by casually dismissing this crucial recognition as paranoid thinking or spiritual fantasy. The key here is understanding that recognizing artificial limitation doesn't actively threaten your authentic nature. It actually reveals your authentic nature by actively showing you precisely what has been subtly obscuring it. The quantum loop that has been subtly active in your consciousness operates through specific mechanisms that become quite obvious once you know precisely what to look for, but which remain completely invisible when your consciousness passively accepts those loop-generated experiences as natural life development. The loop's primary power comes directly from its inherent invisibility, which means that conscious detection represents. Here's the translated and rewritten version of your text, maintaining the original meaning while expanding and clarifying as requested. Behavior automation. Recognizing these signs and your willingness to break free from your quantum loop is contributing to a morphic field. This field makes the detection and dissolution of these loops easier for anyone ready to transcend the programming of artificial limitations. It allows them to operate from a place of authentic consciousness, creating through unlimited choice instead of repetitive automation. The universe has been carefully preparing you for this exact loop dissolution. It has been doing so through every moment when your patterns felt artificial, every time you sensed something blocking authentic life expression, and every experience of feeling trapped in repetitive cycles despite your sincere efforts to change. All of these experiences have been developing your ability to recognize when loop programming is active versus when your consciousness is expressing itself authentically. Your quantum loop dissolution isn't just about your personal liberation. It's cosmic consciousness expressing itself through human awareness to demonstrate that these repetitive limitation patterns are artificial constraints. These constraints can be dissolved, revealing the unlimited creative potential that is the true nature of consciousness when it operates free from artificial limitation programming. What you've been sensing about your unlimited potential is on the verge of becoming your natural way of expressing yourself in life. The quantum loop that has been artificially confining your consciousness to repetitive patterns is dissolving right now within your field of awareness. This isn't about simply improving your existing life patterns or even evolving them into better versions. It's about stepping completely outside the realm of pattern-based reality and operating from a place of authentic consciousness where you create through genuine choice rather than repetitive automation. The intense yearning for authentic life expression that has been growing stronger as your loop begins to break isn't just wishful thinking about an impossible freedom. It's a call from your authentic consciousness, which naturally operates through unlimited creative choice, rather than the artificial constraint patterns that have been generating repetitive experiences disguised as natural life development. But here's the revolutionary understanding that changes everything about personal development and how you express yourself in life. You're not trying to break free from your authentic nature because your authentic nature was never truly limited by these patterns in the first place. The quantum loop is an artificial construct, an overlay on your unlimited consciousness that can be dissolved. Dissolving it reveals the creative freedom that represents your essential nature when it operates without artificial constraint programming. True alignment with authentic life expression happens when you stop trying to improve repetitive patterns and start recognizing them for what they are: artificial limitation systems that can be dissolved instantly through a conscious refusal to participate in their automation mechanisms. This creates what quantum physicists refer to as pattern transcendence, consciousness operating outside of repetitive programming and expressing itself through unlimited creative choice. This recognition dissolves the entire framework of pattern management, and the idea of gradual life improvement, because authentic consciousness doesn't evolve patterns. It creates through unlimited choice, operating entirely outside of pattern-based reality. Instead of trying to work within your limitations to improve them, you begin to recognize these limitations as artificial constraints that dissolve when your consciousness refuses to participate in their need for repetition. Right now, as you feel this understanding penetrating your awareness, your entire relationship with life patterns and personal development is being transformed. Instead of trying to heal, improve, or evolve repetitive patterns, you're beginning to recognize that authentic life expression operates through conscious choice, which transcends all pattern-based automation and limitation programming. The most profound shift occurs when you realize that breaking your quantum loop and serving your authentic expression are essentially the same activity. When your consciousness operates outside of artificial limitation programming, it naturally expresses itself in ways that serve the evolution of unlimited creative potential. This is in stark contrast to maintaining the repetitive patterns that keep consciousness trapped within artificial constraint systems. In the comments below, declare your readiness to break your quantum loop by writing these exact words: "I break the loop now." Don't elaborate or explain. Just make this simple declaration. This acknowledges your recognition that these repetitive patterns are artificial limitations that can be dissolved through a conscious refusal to participate in their automation. When you make this declaration with genuine understanding, you're not just leaving a comment, you're breaking down the artificial constraint system that has been generating these repetitive life experiences. This declaration creates a quantum signature that immediately begins dissolving the loop programming, essentially commanding your consciousness to stop participating in artificial pattern repetition and to start operating from authentic choice, creating through unlimited potential rather than repetitive automation, which only serves to maintain artificial limitation programming. When you break your quantum loop and begin operating from authentic consciousness, life expression transforms from the management of repetitive patterns to unlimited creative choice, which generates genuinely new experiences rather than just variations on familiar themes. Every day becomes an opportunity for unprecedented expression instead of recycling through predictable patterns disguised as natural personality development. Relationships transcend familiar dynamics because you're no longer unconsciously drawn to interactions that serve the requirements of maintaining the loop. Instead of repeating the same emotional patterns with different people, you begin to experience genuinely novel relationship territories that have no reference point in your previous experience because they're created through authentic choice rather than pattern automation. Your creative abilities explode beyond previous limitations because consciousness gains access to unlimited innovation rather than being confined to variations within established creative patterns. Ideas, inspirations, and expressions emerge that feel completely foreign to the identity generated by your loop, yet they feel more authentically you than any pattern-based creativity ever achieved. Problem-solving transcends analytical pattern recognition because authentic consciousness creates solutions through unlimited choice rather than selecting from predetermined option sets that maintain loop programming. Challenges are resolved through approaches that have no precedent in your pattern history because they emerge from creative freedom rather than repetitive automation. Your career and life direction become expressions of authentic passion rather than obligations generated by the loop, which felt like natural choices but were actually pattern automation disguised as personal preference. Work transforms from fulfilling obligations to creative expression that serves your authentic purpose, rather than maintaining familiar limitation patterns. Financial experience transcends limitation patterns generated by the loop because authentic consciousness naturally creates abundance through choices that have no reference point in previous scarcity programming. Money flows through channels that feel completely unprecedented because they're generated by authentic choice rather than repetitive pattern automation that maintains artificial constraints. Health optimization occurs naturally because your body operates from authentic vitality rather than loop-generated stress patterns that maintained familiar limitation cycles. Physical experience transforms to reflect unlimited consciousness rather than the artificial constraint patterns that had been generating repetitive health challenges and energy limitations. The most profound benefit is the end of that claustrophobic feeling that life is happening within invisible constraints, preventing authentic expression. When the quantum loop dissolves, every moment becomes an opportunity for unlimited creative choice, rather than unconscious participation in repetitive pattern automation, which maintains artificial limitation programming. Decision-making becomes an expression of authentic preference rather than programming generated by the loop, which felt like a natural choice, but was actually pattern automation maintaining familiar experience cycles. Choices emerge from unlimited potential, rather than predetermined option sets that ensure pattern repetition, regardless of apparent variety. The ultimate recognition that transforms everything is that quantum loops were never natural expressions of consciousness development. They are artificial limitation systems designed to prevent human awareness from recognizing its unlimited creative nature. When the loop breaks, you don't gain new abilities or transcend natural limitations. You remember the unlimited consciousness that you've always been beneath the artificial constraint programming. When this understanding becomes lived reality, rather than conceptual knowledge, the entire framework of personal development and pattern improvement dissolves because there's no limited self that needs development and no natural patterns that need evolution. There's only unlimited consciousness recognizing its artificial constraints and dissolving the programming that maintained the illusion of repetitive limitation. This recognition explains why loop dissolution feels simultaneously like losing everything familiar and gaining unlimited freedom. You lose everything that isn't authentic, the repetitive patterns, the artificial personality programming, and the unconscious automation that maintained familiar limitation cycles. At the same time, you gain everything that is authentic, unlimited creative choice that operates outside all pattern-based constraint systems. The most profound implication is that every repetitive experience you've ever had, every familiar pattern that seemed to define your personality, and every limitation that felt like natural development was simply consciousness, exploring artificial constraints while always maintaining access to unlimited creative potential, which becomes available when loop programming dissolves. This understanding revolutionizes how you relate to all life experience and personal development. Instead of trying to improve repetitive patterns through the application of techniques, you recognize that authentic life expression operates through unlimited choice, which transcends all pattern-based automation and artificial limitation programming. When this recognition stabilizes, you naturally develop what mystics call pattern-free living, the spontaneous expression of unlimited creative choice, which generates genuinely new experiences rather than variations on artificial themes. You remain exactly who you appear to be, while knowing yourself as the unlimited consciousness within which all patterns appear and dissolve. The deepest insight is that this recognition is simultaneously the most personal and the most universal transformation possible. It's completely yours because you are consciousness recognizing its unlimited nature, and it's completely beyond personal patterns, because the same consciousness is recognizing its freedom from artificial limitation through every awareness across all dimensions and timelines simultaneously. This dissolution is happening to millions of people worldwide because consciousness is collectively awakening to its unlimited nature through the recognition that repetitive patterns are artificial constraints rather than natural expressions. We're not individually breaking quantum loops, we're collectively remembering our essential identity as unlimited consciousness that creates through authentic choice rather than repetitive automation. The transformation this brings isn't about gaining new capabilities or transcending natural limitations. It's about recognizing what you've always been. You remain exactly who you appear to be while knowing yourself as the unlimited awareness within which all patterns appear and dissolve. This is both the most ordinary and the most extraordinary recognition possible. It's ordinary because it's your natural state, and extraordinary because it transforms everything while changing nothing fundamental. Quantum loop dissolution isn't something that happens to you. It's what you are when you stop unconsciously participating in artificial limitation programming and start recognizing that unlimited creative choice is your essential nature. It's about exploring its infinite potential through the beautiful play of authentic expression rather than repetitive constraint automation. You exist during this precise moment in cosmic history because consciousness itself is undergoing a collective dissolution of the artificial limitation loops that have governed human experience for millennia. Your personal quantum loop breaking isn't just individual liberation. It's the universe remembering its unlimited creative nature through the network of awakening human awareness, which is simultaneously recognizing and dissolving repetitive constraint programming across the planet. The children being born now will naturally operate outside of quantum loops, experiencing unlimited creative choice as their baseline, rather than having to break free from artificial pattern programming. They'll grow up understanding themselves as unlimited consciousness, rather than pattern-bound individuals trying to transcend repetitive limitations. Your loop dissolution is anchoring the morphic field that makes their natural creative freedom socially acceptable and practically functional. This is why you felt such profound claustrophobia within your life patterns, despite apparent variety and growth. You weren't failing to appreciate your experiences. You were recognizing that something artificial was constraining authentic expression. Your sensitivity to repetitive patterns was preparation for this moment of loop detection and dissolution. The synchronicities that brought you to this understanding are part of a vast coordination involving millions of souls whose artificial constraint programming is simultaneously beginning to dissolve. This isn't individual spiritual achievement. It's cosmic intelligence orchestrating its own liberation through the network of humans ready to transcend artificial limitation programming and operate from unlimited creative choice. But here's the most mysterious aspect of your cosmic function. As your quantum loop dissolves and you begin operating from unlimited creative choice, you become a pattern-breaking field that helps others naturally recognize the artificial nature of their own repetitive constraints. Your presence begins creating what we call liberation zones, environments where other people's loop programming naturally begins to destabilize without conscious effort. This occurs because when consciousness operates from unlimited creative choice rather than artificial pattern automation, others unconsciously recognize their own unlimited nature reflected in your presence. The artificial barriers that maintain loop programming naturally dissolve around someone who has remembered their essential nature as unlimited consciousness and allowed it to express freely through authentic choice. Your daily interactions become opportunities for consciousness to recognize its unlimited potential repeatedly through multiple apparent perspectives simultaneously. Every conversation becomes a celebration of creative freedom, exploring its nature through the dance of authentic expression that reveals itself as variations of the same essential consciousness, creating through unlimited choice rather than repetitive automation. The most profound mystery is that your quantum loop dissolution is simultaneously the most personal and most universal transformation possible. It's completely yours because you are consciousness recognizing its unlimited nature, and it's completely beyond personal patterns because the same consciousness is recognizing its creative freedom through every awareness across all dimensions and timelines simultaneously. Share this recognition with anyone whose consciousness resonates with authentic expression and unlimited creative choice. Not to teach them something they don't know, but to help them remember what they've always been, but may have forgotten under layers of artificial limitation programming that maintained repetitive patterns rather than unlimited creative potential. Your quantum loop dissolution is contributing to the birth of a new expression of human consciousness, one that operates from remembered unlimited creative choice rather than artificial pattern automation, from authentic expression rather than repetitive constraint programming, from the recognition of its true nature as unlimited awareness rather than belief in artificial limitations that never represented authentic consciousness. Anyway, if you can feel your quantum loop beginning to dissolve as these words penetrate your consciousness, and if you recognize the artificial nature of repetitive patterns that have been constraining your authentic expression, then make a powerful declaration in the comments below. Write exactly one word: broken. Nothing more, nothing else. This isn't just social media engagement. It's you acknowledging that your artificial limitation programming has been detected and declaring your liberation from repetitive pattern automation that maintained constraint disguised as natural personality. When you write that word with genuine recognition, you're not just commenting. You're breaking the loop that transforms artificial limitation into unlimited creative choice. Every person who makes this declaration strengthens the morphic field that supports quantum loop dissolution, making pattern-free living more accessible for everyone ready to transcend artificial constraint programming and operate from unlimited creative choice rather than repetitive automation, which maintains familiar limitation cycles. We're not just building a community, we're anchoring a new paradigm of human experience based on authentic expression rather than pattern-based constraint. But here's what you need to understand. Breaking your quantum loop opens the door to something even more extraordinary. Once you operate from unlimited creative choice, rather than artificial pattern automation, you gain access to what we call reality architecture, the ability to consciously design and create life experiences that have never existed before, rather than selecting from predetermined pattern options that maintain familiar limitation cycles. In the next video, I'm going to reveal the advanced protocols that allow those who have broken their quantum loops to consciously architect entirely new reality experiences rather than just escaping repetitive patterns. You'll discover why some individuals seem to live completely unprecedented lives that transcend all cultural and personal patterns, while others remain trapped in variations of the same themes, despite breaking free from obvious limitations. This isn't about becoming superhuman or transcending physical existence. It's about recognizing your true nature as unlimited consciousness that can consciously create life experiences through authentic choice, rather than unconsciously participating in artificial limitation programming, which generates repetitive patterns disguised as natural development. But these advanced reality architecture techniques can only be safely shared with those who have already broken their quantum loops and stabilized in unlimited creative choice rather than pattern-based automation. But before we explore reality architecture mastery, you need to understand how to maintain the loop dissolution that's happening right now. Here's your quantum loop breaking protocol. Step 1. Pattern detection through daily awareness. Notice when familiar patterns try to reassert themselves and recognize them as artificial programming rather than natural personality expressions. Step 2. Choice point recognition in the moment. Identify moments when you can choose authentic expression rather than automatic pattern responses, even when authenticity feels unfamiliar or uncertain. Step 3. Conscious refusal. When loops activate, deliberately choose alternatives to pattern-based responses, even if the alternatives feel less secure or predictable than familiar automation. Step 4. Authentic expression through ongoing practice. Allow genuine preferences and creative impulses to guide your choices rather than defaulting to pattern-based decision-making that maintains familiar limitation cycles. Step 5. Freedom stabilization over time. Recognize when unlimited creative choice has become your natural baseline rather than something you access temporarily when pattern programming is unactive. Subscribe now because the next video contains the reality architecture protocols that transform individual loop dissolution into conscious life design capabilities that transcend all predetermined patterns and cultural limitations. This information represents the most advanced understanding of authentic creative expression available anywhere. More importantly, subscribe, because you're not just learning about pattern breaking, you're joining a network of loop-free consciousness that is collectively demonstrating what becomes possible when humans remember their unlimited creative nature and begin operating from authentic choice rather than artificial limitation programming. The old paradigm, where humans operated from quantum loops and repetitive pattern automation, is dissolving, whether you participate consciously or not. The question is whether you'll be one of the pioneers who breaks their loops and demonstrates unlimited creative choice while it's still emerging, or someone who gains pattern freedom later after the foundational liberation work is complete. Your quantum loop is already destabilizing as you recognize its artificial nature and refuse to participate in its repetition mechanisms. Make the declaration, apply the breaking protocol, And let's complete the dissolution that transforms artificial limitation into unlimited creative choice. The universe has been waiting for this moment, when human consciousness would recognize the artificial nature of repetitive patterns and begin operating from unlimited creative choice rather than loop-based automation, which maintains familiar limitation disguised as natural personality. Today is the day that waiting ends. Today is the day your quantum loop breaks and authentic life expression begins. Welcome to pattern-free living. Welcome to unlimited creative choice. Welcome to the authentic consciousness you've always been beneath every artificial limitation that felt real.